What if the woman you cast aside, the wife you erased from your life, returned on the most public day of your new beginning? Not as a ghost of the past, but as a force of nature draped in vengeance, red, and flanked by the most ruthless legal minds money can buy. This isn't just a story of a wedding crashed. It's a tale of a woman's resurrection from the ashes of betrayal. Witness the moment a forgotten wife walks back into her husband's life, not to reclaim him, but to dismantle his empire piece by piece in front of the world. The late afternoon sun of a perfect Californian September day cast a golden glow over the sprawling lawns of the Blackwood estate. It was the kind of light that filmmakers dreamed of, bathing the scene in an ethereal radiance that seemed to bless the union it was about to witness. Today, Adrian Hayes, the golden boy of Silicon Valley. The man who had turned a small startup into a tech behemoth was marrying Scarlett Preston, a woman whose beauty was as renowned as her family's old money lineage. The guest list was a who's who of the tech world, Hollywood, and international business. They mingled on the manicured lawns, champagne flutes in hand, their laughter and chatter a symphony of power and privilege. The air was thick with the scent of 1,000 white roses, their petals lining the aisle that led to a magnificent floral arch overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Adrian stood at the altar, a vision of bespoke Tom Ford, his handsome face alight with a triumphant smile. He looked every bit the man who had everything. At his side, his best man, Nicholas Thorne, a man whose own family was a dynasty in the world of finance, offered a reassuring pat on the back. The string quartet began to play a soaring romantic melody, signaling the bride's arrival. Scarlett Preston was breathtaking. Her Vera Wang gown, a confection of lace and tulle, trailed behind her, and the diamond necklace, gracing her long, elegant neck, sparkled with a fire that rivaled the sun's reflection on the ocean. She was the perfect bride for the perfect man, and as she glided down the aisle on her father's arm, a collective sigh of admiration rippled through the crowd. The officiant, a retired judge with a sonorous voice, began the ceremony. His words, a poetic tribute to love and commitment, floated on the gentle sea breeze. Adrian and Scarlett exchanged loving glances, their hands clasped together. They were the picture of modern royalty, their future as bright and boundless as the horizon before them. It was in that moment, as the judge was about to ask for the rings, that a ripple of a different kind went through the crowd. It started at the back, a murmur that grew into a wave of whispers and craned necks. A figure was walking down the aisle, but it wasn't a late-arriving guest or a tardy bridesmaid. It was a woman in red. The red was a defiant slash of color against the sea of pastels and muted tones. It was the color of blood, of passion, of a warning. The dress, a simple yet exquisitely tailored sheath, clung to her every curve, a stark contrast to the frothy confection worn by the bride. Her hair, a cascade of dark waves, fell over one shoulder, and her face, though pale, was set in a mask of grim determination. As she drew closer, a collective gasp went through the crowd. Those who knew, those who remembered, recognized her. It was Lilith Hayes, Adrian's wife. A stunned silence fell over the wedding. The string quartet faltered the beautiful melody, dying in a discordant squeak. All eyes were on Lilith as she came to a stop at the foot of the altar, her gaze fixed on the man she had once loved, the man who was about to commit bigamy in front of 500 of their closest friends and associates. Adrian's face, a moment ago so full of joy and triumph, was now a mask of disbelief and horror. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking ashen and suddenly terribly old. Scarlet, her perfect smile frozen on her lips, looked from Lilith to Adrian, a flicker of confusion and then dawning realization in her eyes. "Lilith." Adrian breathed, his voice barely a whisper. She gave him a small, cold smile. "You seem to have forgotten something, Adrian," she said, her voice clear and steady, carrying in the sudden deathly hush. "Me." The crowd erupted in a cacophony of gasps and frantic whispers. The media, who had been cordoned off at a respectful distance, surged forward, their cameras flashing like a volley of gunfire. The perfect wedding had just become the scandal of the decade. But Lilith wasn't finished. She turned her attention to the officiant, her voice now laced with an icy authority. "I believe this ceremony is null and void," she announced, "as Mr. Hayes is already married. To me." As if on cue, two figures detached themselves from the back of the crowd and began to walk down the aisle towards her. They were both men, dressed in impeccable suits that spoke of immense power and even greater wealth. The older of the two, a man with a shock of silver hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing, was Marcus Thorne, the reclusive billionaire whose investments had shaped the modern world. The man at his side was Benjamin Carter, a name that struck fear into the hearts of corporate raiders and courtroom adversaries alike. He was the head of Carter and Associates, a law firm so powerful it was said they could change the course of nations. They came to stand on either side of Lilith, a silent, formidable show of support. Marcus Thorne placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of both protection and endorsement. Benjamin Carter held a leather-bound folio, his expression grim and resolute. The forgotten wife had not come alone. She had come with an army of billionaires and the lawyers who served them. And as she stood there, a crimson warrior in a field of white roses, Lilith Hayes made it clear that she was not there to reclaim her husband. She was there to claim what was hers, and what was hers was everything. The wedding was over. The war had just begun. 2 years. For 2 years, Lilith had been a ghost, not dead, but erased. The day Adrian had left had been as ordinary as any other. A Tuesday. He'd kissed her goodbye, told her he loved her, and walked out of their sprawling Marin County home for a business trip to Singapore. He never came back. His calls became less frequent, his excuses more elaborate. The distance grew not just in miles, but in a cold, yawning chasm that opened up in their marriage. Then came the lawyers, not the bulldog litigators he now faced, but a slick, smiling man from a boutique firm who served her with divorce papers. The grounds were irreconcilable differences. The settlement offer was an insult, a pittance designed to make her disappear quietly. It was backed by a thinly veiled threat challenge, this, and we will bury you in legal fees and public humiliation. At first, she'd been too broken to fight. The man she had loved since college, the man whose dreams she had supported, whose late-night coding sessions she had fueled with coffee and encouragement, had discarded her like a piece of outdated hardware. She had been his partner in every sense of the word, investing not just her time and love, but a significant inheritance from her grandmother, the seed money that had launched his first successful app, Nexus. He had promised her the world. He had left her with a shattered heart and a stack of legal documents designed to sever her from the life she had helped build. The first few months were a blur of tears and disbelief. She moved out of their home, the one they had designed together, and into a small, anonymous apartment in Oakland. She cut off contact with their mutual friends who had all predictably sided with the charismatic, successful Adrian. She was alone adrift in a sea of grief and betrayal. The world saw Adrian Hayes as a visionary, a self-made titan. They didn't see the woman whose quiet faith and financial backing had been the launchpad for his meteoric rise. It was during this bleak period that a letter arrived. It was on thick cream-colored stationery, the return address, simply a discreet monogram, MT. Marcus Thorne. He had been a close friend of her late grandfather, a fellow collector of rare books, and a man who valued loyalty above all else. Lilith hadn't seen him in years, assuming he had long forgotten her. The letter was short and to the point. He had heard of her situation. He was disappointed in Adrian, whom he had once mentored, and he wanted to help. He wrote, "Your grandfather was a man of integrity, Lilith. He would not stand for this. Neither will I." Their first meeting was at his private library, a vast 2-story room filled with the scent of old leather and aged paper. Marcus Thorne, a man whose net worth was a subject of endless speculation in financial journals, was surprisingly gentle. He listened, his keen eyes missing nothing as she recounted the story of her marriage and its brutal end. He saw past the pain to the steel beneath. "He didn't just break your heart, my dear Marcus," said his voice a low rumble. "He committed fraud. The seed money from your grandmother. Was it a gift or an investment?" "An investment," Lilith whispered. "We had a formal agreement. I still have the paperwork." A slow, predatory smile touched Marcus's lips. "Good. Because we are not going to ask for your share back. We are going to take it." That was the day the ghost of Lilith Hayes began to fade, and a new woman started to emerge. Marcus Thorne didn't just offer sympathy. He offered a lifeline, an arsenal. He introduced her to Benjamin Carter, a man whose legal acumen was legendary. Carter was more than a lawyer. He was a strategist, a corporate warlord who waged battles in boardrooms and courtrooms with surgical precision. Carter and his team at Carter and Associates spent months meticulously combing through every document, every email, every financial transaction related to Adrian's company Innovate Corp. They unearthed the original investment agreement. Lilith had signed a document Adrian's lawyers had conveniently lost. They traced the flow of her inheritance, showing how it had been leveraged to secure further funding, the very foundation of his now multi-billion-dollar empire. They also discovered something else, something far more explosive. Adrian had never filed the final divorce decree. In his arrogance, in his haste to move on to his new life with Scarlett, he had overlooked the final crucial step. The divorce was never finalized. In the eyes of the law, Lilith Hayes was still his wife. When they presented this information to Lilith, she was the one who decided the next move. It wasn't Marcus or Carter who suggested crashing the wedding. It was her. It was a move of breathtaking audacity, a public declaration of war. "He tried to erase me in private," she told them, her voice devoid of any tremor. "I will reclaim my life in public." So now, as she stood before the shattered remnants of Adrian's perfect day, she felt not a shred of fear. The gasps of the crowd, the frantic flashing of cameras, the panicked look on Adrian's face. It was all just noise. The only thing that mattered was the solid presence of Marcus Thorne and Benjamin Carter at her back. Carter stepped forward, opening the leather folio. His voice, unlike the officiant's, was not warm or poetic. It was cold, sharp, and utterly uncompromising. "On behalf of my client, Mrs. Lilith Hayes," he began, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We are serving Mr. Adrian Hayes with a cease and desist order for this illegal ceremony." Furthermore, he continued letting the word hang in the air. "We are filing a temporary restraining order to freeze all of Mr. Hayes's personal and corporate assets, pending a full investigation into fraudulent activities and misappropriation of funds." He produced a set of documents, handing a copy to the stunned officiant, and another to a pale-faced man, who Lilith recognized as Adrian's personal lawyer, scrambling forward from the front row. Adrian finally found his voice, a strangled, furious sound. "This is insane! You can't do this, security!" But no security guards came forward. They stood at the periphery, hesitant, intimidated by the sheer power radiating from the two men flanking Lilith. Scarlet, her face a mask of fury and humiliation, turned on Adrian. "What is this, Adrian? Who is she?" Her voice was a shrill cry of disbelief. Adrian couldn't look at her. His eyes were locked on Lilith, on the woman he had thought he could simply delete from his life. He saw no trace of the heartbroken girl he had abandoned. In her place stood a queen, robed in scarlet, ready to burn his kingdom to the ground. The backing of a billionaire had given her the means, but it was his own betrayal that had given her the will. The aftermath of the aborted wedding was a media firestorm. The image of Lilith in her red dress, flanked by Marcus Thorne and Benjamin Carter, was splashed across every news outlet, from the highbrow pages of the Wall Street Journal to the salacious feeds of celebrity gossip blogs. The narrative was irresistible. The scorned wife, backed by a titan of industry, returning to claim her pound of flesh. The story of Adrian Hayes, the tech wunderkind, was rewritten overnight. He was no longer a visionary. He was an adulterer, a bigamist, and a fraud. The unraveling of Adrian Hayes was swift and brutal. The restraining order on his assets was just the first cut in a death by 1,000 legal paper cuts orchestrated by Benjamin Carter. Innovate Corp's stock plummeted in pre-market trading the following Monday. The board of directors, a collection of venture capitalists and industry veterans who had once lauded Adrian as a genius, called for an emergency meeting. They were not concerned with the morality of his actions, but with the catastrophic impact on their investments. Adrian's carefully constructed world began to crumble around him. He was a man who thrived on control, on the admiration of others. He had built his identity on the foundation of his success, and now that foundation was cracking under the weight of his own deceit. He holed himself up in his penthouse apartment, the one he was supposed to share with Scarlett. But she was long gone, having fled back to the protective embrace of her family, the Prestons, who were now engaged in their own frantic damage control. The public humiliation was relentless. Talk shows dissected his fall from grace. Comedians made him the butt of their jokes. The name Adrian Hayes became synonymous with hubris and betrayal. But the true battle was being fought not in the court of public opinion, but in the sterile, air-conditioned conference rooms of Carter and Associates. Benjamin Carter laid out his case with methodical precision. He presented the board of Innovate Corp with the original investment agreement, signed by both Adrian and Lilith. He then presented a forensic accounting report that traced the flow of Lilith's initial $2 million inheritance. The report showed how that money had been used as collateral to secure a series of loans that had allowed the company to scale rapidly in its early, crucial years. Without that seed capital, Innovate Corp would have withered on the vine. Carter's argument was simple and devastating. Lilith wasn't just an early investor. She was a founding partner. Her initial contribution entitled her not to a simple repayment of her loan, but to a significant equity stake in the multi-billion-dollar corporation. The divorce settlement Adrian had tried to force on her was a fraudulent attempt to erase her foundational role and steal her share of the empire she had helped build. As the legal pressure mounted, Other cracks began to appear in Adrian's golden boy facade. Journalists, smelling blood in the water, started digging into his past. They uncovered stories of his ruthlessness, of how he had allegedly stolen the core idea for his first app from his college roommate, a quiet, unassuming genius named Leo Vance. They found former employees who spoke of a toxic work environment, of a charismatic boss who took credit for their ideas and discarded them when they were no longer useful. Leo Vance, now a computer science professor at a small Midwestern college, was tracked down by a reporter from the New York Times. He had long been silent-bound by a non-disclosure agreement, and a small settlement he had accepted years ago, too intimidated to challenge the rising star that was Adrian Hayes. But now, with Adrian's invincibility shattered, Leo felt emboldened to speak. His on-the-record interview was a bombshell. He described in detail the late-night brainstorming sessions, the whiteboard diagrams, the lines of code he had written that became the backbone of Nexus. He recounted how Adrian, his supposed best friend, had taken their shared project, filed the patents solely in his own name, and pushed him out with a pittance and a threat of legal action. The story of Leo Vance painted a picture of a predator who had been hiding in plain sight. Adrian wasn't a visionary. He was a thief, a man who built his success on the stolen dreams of others. First Leo, then Lilith. It was a pattern of behavior. Inside the Innovate Corp boardroom, the atmosphere was funereal. The board members, faced with irrefutable evidence of Adrian's fraud and the escalating public relations nightmare, knew they had to act. Nicholas Thorne, Adrian's best man and a member of the board representing his family's investment fund, was caught in an impossible position. His loyalty to his friend warred with his fiduciary duty to his family. In the end, business won. At an emergency meeting, the board voted to suspend Adrian Hayes as CEO, pending the outcome of the legal proceedings. They issued a public statement distancing the company from its founder and assuring shareholders that they were taking the allegations seriously. Adrian received the news via a cold, formal email. He was locked out of his own company, his creation the source of his power and his identity. He smashed his phone against the wall, the screen spiderwebbing into 1,000 pieces, a perfect metaphor for his life. He was trapped, a king, dethroned, his castle walls closing in on him. The unraveling was not just public, it was deeply, violently personal. And it was far from over. Lilith had exposed the rot at the core of his life, and now the entire edifice was collapsing. Scarlett Preston had not become the fiancée of a tech billionaire by being a fool. Beautiful, yes. Privileged, certainly. But beneath the polished veneer of a society heiress was a shrewd and calculating mind. She had viewed her union with Adrian Hayes as a merger, a consolidation of new world tech money and old world social standing. She was not in love with Adrian. She was in love with the idea of him, with the power and prestige he represented. The disastrous wedding was not a heartbreak. It was a catastrophic business failure. She had retreated to her family's sprawling estate in the Hamptons, a fortress of waspish wealth and influence. The initial shock had quickly given way to a cold, pragmatic anger. She was not just embarrassed, she was furious. Adrian's deception had made her a public spectacle, a laughingstock. The Prestons, a family that prided themselves on their discretion and immaculate reputation, were now entangled in a scandal of the highest order. Her father, a formidable man named William Preston, who ran his family's investment bank with an iron fist, had been livid. But his anger was directed less at Adrian's morals and more at his stupidity. How could he have been so sloppy? He had raged, pacing the length of their cavernous drawing room. To not even finalize the divorce, it's amateurish. Scarlett, however, was playing a different game. While her family focused on containing the public relations fallout, she was focused on opportunity. She saw Lilith not as a rival, but as a key to understanding the full extent of Adrian's deception, and more importantly, a key to salvaging something for herself from the wreckage. She made a move that stunned her family and intrigued Benjamin Carter. She reached out to Lilith's legal team, requesting a private meeting. Carter, sensing a potential strategic advantage, agreed. He arranged for the meeting to take place on neutral ground, a private suite at the Carlyle Hotel in New York. Lilith was hesitant at first. The thought of facing the woman her husband had tried to replace her with was nauseating, but Marcus Thorne advised her to go. "Know your enemy," he had said, "and in this case she may not be the enemy you think she is." Scarlett arrived for the meeting alone, exuding an air of calm control. She was dressed not in the soft pastels of a society belle, but in a sharp, tailored power suit. She looked Lilith directly in the eye, her expression unreadable. "Mrs. Hayes Scarlett," began her voice, cool and even. "I imagine you have no desire to speak with me. I will be brief. I am not here to apologize, nor am I here to fight over a man who has proven himself unworthy of either of us." Lilith remained silent, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I want to know what you know," Scarlett continued, "and I am prepared to offer you something in return." Benjamin Carter, ever the pragmatist, interjected. "And what could you possibly offer my clients?" Preston Scarlett turned her gaze to him. Information. Adrian was not just careless with his marriage. He was careless with his business. He spoke a great deal about his plans, his finances. He was arrogant. He liked to boast. A twist of the knife, a revelation that reframed the entire narrative. "He told me about you," Scarlett said, her eyes now on Lilith. "Not your name, not the details. But he referred to you. He called you his first round funding. He laughed about it. He said he had a silent partner who would never see a dime. The casual cruelty of it, the cold, dismissive way he had spoken of her, hit Lilith harder than the public humiliation. It wasn't just betrayal. It was utter contempt. "What do you want?" Scarlett Lilith asked, her voice tight. "A peace," Scarlett said simply. "When you strip him of his assets, when you take control of Innovate Corp, I want a share. Not as a victim, but as an ally. I can provide you with details of offshore accounts of shell corporations he set up to hide assets from the company. And from you. He trusted me. He told me things he would never tell his lawyers or his board. It was a stunning proposal." Scarlett was offering to become a co-conspirator in Adrian's downfall. She was not a victim to be pitied, but a player in her own right, determined to turn a humiliating defeat into a financial victory. She had recognized where the power now lay, with Lilith, and she was aligning herself with the winning side. She produced a small encrypted flash drive from her purse and placed it on the table. This contains a list of account numbers, names of contacts and locations of servers he used for his private dealings. It's a starting point, a gesture of good faith. Help me get my pound of flesh. Lilith and I will help you get your empire. The confrontation that Lilith had dreaded had turned into something else entirely. It was a negotiation, a meeting of two women who had been wronged by the same man, but who were now refusing to be defined by his actions. Lilith looked at Scarlett, no longer seeing a rival, but a reflection of her own newfound ruthlessness. She picked up the flash drive. "Mr. Carter will be in touch," she said, her voice steady. Scarlett nodded, a flicker of a smile on her lips. She stood up, her point made her offer on the table. As she walked out of the suite, Lilith realized that this war had just gained a new, unexpected, and potentially valuable soldier. The Mistress was not just a footnote in the story of Adrian's betrayal. She was about to become a key architect of his destruction. The flash drive from Scarlett was a Rosetta Stone for Adrian's hidden financial world. Benjamin Carter's team of forensic accountants, working in a secure, windowless room they called the War Room, descended on the data with ravenous intensity. What they found was a complex web of offshore entities, shell corporations registered in Panama and the Cayman Islands, and undeclared bank accounts in Switzerland. Adrian hadn't just been hiding money from Lilith. He had been systematically siphoning funds from Innovate Corp for years. He had used these funds to finance a lavish lifestyle that went far beyond his official salary and stock options. Private jets, a yacht moored in Monaco, a secret art collection filled with stolen masterpieces. It was a treasure trove of ill-gotten gains. More damningly, he had used the diverted funds to make secret personal investments in rival tech startups, a clear and flagrant violation of his fiduciary duty as CEO. Armed with this explosive new evidence, Lilith's strategy shifted from a personal legal battle to an all-out corporate assault. This was no longer just about reclaiming her initial investment. It was about seizing control of the company he had built with her money, and then systematically plundered. The battlefield was the Innovate Corp boardroom. Marcus Thorne, leveraging his immense influence and a significant block of shares he had quietly acquired on the open market, called for a vote of no confidence in the entire existing board. His argument was simple. They had been either complicit in Adrian's fraud or grossly negligent in their oversight. The emergency shareholder meeting was a tense, high-stakes affair held in a cavernous auditorium. The financial press was there in full force, live blogging every moment. Lilith, flanked by Marcus and Carter, sat in the front row, a picture of calm authority. She had shed the vengeful red for a crisp navy blue power suit. She was not the uninvited guest anymore. She was the presumptive heir to the throne. Adrian was not present. On the advice of his beleaguered lawyers, he remained in seclusion. But his presence loomed over the proceedings like a ghost. Benjamin Carter took the stage, and with the cold precision of a surgeon, laid out the evidence of Adrian's corporate malfeasance. He projected bank statements from Zurich incorporation documents from Panama and incriminating emails that showed Adrian boasting about his off-balance sheet ventures. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. The shareholders, seeing their investments being pilfered, were in an uproar. The vote was a landslide. The old board was out. Marcus Thorne was appointed as interim chairman, and he immediately nominated a new slate of directors. His first nominee for a newly created position of Chief Strategy Officer was Lilith Hayes. There was a stunned silence, then a wave of excited murmurs. It was a move of sheer genius. Who better to guide the company's future than the woman who had been there at its inception? The woman whose own stolen capital was the company's lifeblood. Lilith walked to the podium, her heart pounding but her voice steady. She didn't speak of betrayal or revenge. She spoke of the future. She spoke of Innovate Corp's potential of redirecting its resources towards ethical innovation, of rebuilding a corporate culture based on transparency and integrity. She spoke of honoring the brilliant engineers and developers whose work Adrian had taken credit for. She laid out a vision for the company that was so compelling, so clear-eyed, that by the time she finished, the room erupted in a standing ovation. The corporate battle was won. Lilith was now a key figure in the company she had helped create. But the war for Innovate Corp was not just fought in boardrooms. Within the company itself, a quiet rebellion had been brewing. Adrian had ruled through fear and intimidation, surrounded by a small circle of loyalists who had benefited from his patronage. With him gone, those loyalties began to fracture. A senior vice president of engineering, a woman named Rachel Evans, who had been repeatedly passed over for promotion in favor of Adrian's cronies, reached out to Lilith. She brought with her a dossier detailing numerous projects that Adrian had shelved, not because they lacked merit, but because they threatened to outshine his own pet projects. She revealed a culture of intellectual property theft within the company, where Adrian's inner circle would steal ideas from junior engineers and present them as their own. Lilith, with the board's backing, initiated a full internal audit. The results were a corporate bloodbath. Adrian's loyalists were fired. The stolen projects were revived. Rachel Evans was promoted to Chief Technology Officer. A new era was dawning at Innovate Corp, an era built on the ashes of Adrian's reign. From his penthouse prison, Adrian could only watch as the empire he had built was dismantled and remade in Lilith's image. He was hemorrhaging money on legal fees. His so-called friends had abandoned him. Scarlett's betrayal, confirmed by news reports of her cooperation with Lilith's team, was a particularly bitter pill. He had been outmaneuvered at every turn. He had underestimated Lilith, seeing her as a soft, sentimental woman he could easily discard. He had failed to see the iron will beneath the surface, a will that had now been forged into a weapon by his own betrayal. He was cornered. His corporate kingdom lost, his personal life in ruins. The final act was yet to play out, but Adrian Hayes, the golden boy of Silicon Valley, was already a ghost haunting the ruins of his own creation. The battlefield had been won not by brute force, but by strategy, intelligence, and the unassailable power of the truth. The end for Adrian Hayes came not with a dramatic courtroom showdown, but with the quiet, relentless turning of the wheels of justice he could no longer afford to stop. Faced with a mountain of evidence from both his corporate and personal dealings, and abandoned by his high-priced legal team, who saw no path to victory, Adrian was forced into a corner. Benjamin Carter, on behalf of Lilith, offered a settlement. It was not a negotiation. It was a dictation of terms. Adrian would plead guilty to several counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. He would accept a prison sentence, a fate that was once unthinkable for a man of his stature. He would relinquish all claims to Innovate Corp, signing over his remaining shares and stock options to a trust controlled by Lilith. He would publicly acknowledge Lilith as a co-founder of the company and issue a formal apology for his actions. In return, Lilith would not pursue further civil charges related to their marriage. The bigamy charge, which could have added more years to his sentence, would be dropped. It was a clinical, brutal, and utterly comprehensive defeat. Adrian, a man who had once commanded rooms with his charisma, signed the documents in a sterile law office, his hand trembling, his face a haggard mask of resignation. The golden boy was gone, replaced by a broken man facing the consequences of a lifetime of deceit. The final confrontation between Lilith and Adrian took place a week before his sentencing. He had requested the meeting a final, desperate plea for something he could no longer define. They met in the same conference room where he had signed away his empire. He looked smaller, diminished. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by a simple, ill-fitting sweater. The confident swagger had been replaced by a nervous energy, his eyes darting around the room, unable to meet her steady gaze. "Lilith," he began, his voice raspy. I don't know what to say." "There's nothing left to say, Adrian," she replied, her voice devoid of heat. There was no anger left, only a vast, cold emptiness where her love for him used to be. You said it all when you had me served with those papers. You said it all when you stood at that altar with her. You said it all when you laughed about your first-round funding. He flinched at her words, a direct hit. I never meant for it to be like this. A humorless laugh escaped Lilith's lips. What did you mean, for it to be Adrian? Did you think I would just vanish, that I would take your insulting offer and disappear into the ether while you built a new life on the foundations I helped lay? You didn't just leave me. You tried to erase me. You tried to steal my past, my contribution, my very identity. She leaned forward, her eyes finally locking with his. You underestimated me. That was your fatal mistake. You saw me as an accessory to your life, not a partner in it. You saw my support as your due, my inheritance as your entitlement. You never truly saw me at all. Tears welled in Adrian's eyes, tears of self-pity, not remorse. I loved you, Lily, he whispered, using her old pet name. No, she said, her voice cutting and final. You loved what I could do for you. You loved my belief in you. But you never loved me. Because you don't break the person you love. You don't discard them and try to pretend they never existed. That isn't love. It's exploitation. She stood up, the meeting over. There was no catharsis in his downfall, no joy in his tears. There was only the grim satisfaction of a debt being paid. Goodbye, Adrian. She walked out of the room without a backward glance, leaving him to his fate. As for the other players in the drama, their fates were also sealed. Scarlett Preston, true to her word, received a handsome settlement for her cooperation, a consulting fee that was in reality her reward for betraying Adrian. She took the money and disappeared to Europe, reinventing herself once again a perennial survivor. Nicholas Thorne, Adrian's former best man, resigned from his family's firm, his reputation tarnished by his association with Adrian. He became a cautionary tale in the world of finance about the dangers of blind loyalty. And Lilith. She did not ride off into the sunset with the billionaire Marcus Thorne. Their relationship was one of mutual respect and mentorship, not romance. She poured her energy, her intellect, and her newfound strength into Innovate Corp. Under her leadership with Rachel Evans at her side, the company flourished. It became known not just for its cutting-edge technology, but for its ethical practices and its empowering corporate culture. She never wore red again. She didn't need to. Her power was no longer a statement she had to make. It was an undeniable fact woven into the fabric of the life she had reclaimed. She had walked into that wedding, a forgotten wife, a ghost from the past. She emerged a titan, the master of her own destiny, a woman who had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only survived, but had triumphed, building a new empire on the ruins of the old. She was not a vengeful ex-wife. She was Lilith Hayes, and her real story was just beginning. A year can be an eternity. 12 months prior, Lilith Hayes had been a spectre of vengeance in a crimson dress. Now she was the architect of a resurrection, not just of her own life, but of a corporation. Seated at the head of the polished mahogany table in the main boardroom of Innovate Corp, she was the very picture of control. The navy blue power suit from the shareholder meeting had become her uniform, a subtle armor for a new kind of war, the war of peace. The proposal from Omni Digital is aggressive, said Rachel Evans, her chief technology officer, her image crisp on the large screen, connecting them to the Seoul office. Their terms for the AI integration are almost predatory. They want a controlling interest in the source code. Lilith listened, her gaze sweeping over the faces of her new board. They were a team she had hand-picked, sharp, innovative, and loyal to the new ethos of the company. Gone were the sycophantic yes-men who had surrounded Adrian. These were people who challenged her, debated her, and ultimately trusted her. "They're leveraging our past," Lilith stated, her voice calm and measured. "They see the name Hayes and still smell the blood in the water from last year. They think we're desperate to close a Tier 1 partnership to fully erase the stain of the scandal." Marcus Thorne, joining via a secure line from his private jet, chuckled softly. "They're testing you, my dear. They want to see if the warrior who took down a king can now rule a kingdom." Lilith offered a small, knowing smile. "Then we'll have to disappoint them." She looked at each board member in turn. "We reject the offer. We will not sell the soul of this company for a quick PR win. We developed Project Chimera in-house. It's revolutionary. We don't need Omni Digital's platform. They need our algorithm. Let them walk. We'll find another partner, one who understands the meaning of the word." There was a murmur of assent around the table. The decision was bold, risky even. But it was hers. It was the new Innovate Corp. It was a company that knew its own worth. This was the easy part, the part she was good at, the strategy, the fight. The weight of the crown she now wore felt lightest in these moments. It was in the quiet hours that it grew heavy. Later that evening she stood in her new apartment, a minimalist glass and steel penthouse overlooking the twinkling lights of San Francisco. It was a space she had deliberately chosen for its lack of history. There were no ghosts of a shared life here. No memories of laughter in the kitchen or promises whispered in the dark. But in its perfect curated emptiness, a different kind of ghost sometimes emerged. She swirled the amber liquid in her glass, her reflection staring back from the floor-to-ceiling window. The news had been full of it a few months ago. Adrian Hayes, inmate 734, was teaching a business basics class to fellow prisoners at the low-security facility where he was serving his sentence. The articles painted a picture of a fallen man finding redemption, of a brilliant mind being put to good use. They spoke of his charm, his remorse. They barely mentioned Lilith or the fraud that had put him there. The world was already rewriting his narrative, sanding down the sharp edges of his crimes into a more palatable story of a momentary lapse. The bitterness of it surprised her. She had won. She had taken everything. Why did this feel like a small, sharp defeat? The secure line on her tablet buzzed. It was Marcus. "You're brooding," he said, his voice a familiar comfort. It wasn't a question. "Is it that obvious?" she replied, sinking into a sleek leather armchair. "I've known you since you were a girl with pigtails who loved dusty old books." "I know when something is weighing on you," he said gently. "The battle is over, Lilith. You're allowed to lower your shield." I'm not sure I know how she confessed the words, tasting strange in her mouth. For a year, she had been the warrior queen. Vulnerability felt like a foreign language. I spent so long focused on the single goal of taking him down, of reclaiming what was mine. Now, I'm here, and I'm not sure who here is. You are the woman who rebuilt one of the most promising tech companies in the valley, he reminded her. You are the leader who inspires loyalty and brilliance. As for the rest, that takes time. Victory is an event. Peace is a process. His words lingered long after the call ended. Peace is a process. Her process was interrupted a week later by a challenge that came not from a corporate raider, but from within her own new principles. Benjamin Carter arranged a meeting to discuss a lucrative once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The government of a small, resource-rich nation, Carsania, wanted to license Innovate Corp's new logistics and supply chain management software for a nationwide infrastructure project. The deal was worth billions. It would instantly catapult the company's valuation into the stratosphere, silencing any remaining doubters. But there was a catch. Carsania was a nation with a deeply troubling human rights record. Its government was known for suppressing dissent and using technology to monitor its citizens. Innovate Corp's software, designed to create efficiency, could easily be repurposed into a tool of surveillance and control. The old Adrian would have taken the deal without a second's thought. The money, the prestige, it was everything he valued. The moral compromise would have been to him simply the cost of doing business. Lilith felt the weight of that choice press down on her. Her board was split. The fiscally conservative members saw only the unprecedented profit. The more idealistic ones, like Rachel Evans, were horrified. The decision rested solely with her. To accept the deal would be to betray the very foundation upon which she was rebuilding the company. It would make her a hypocrite, no better than Adrian, just smarter about her PR. To reject it would be to turn away a fortune, a move that could be seen by the market as weak and naive. She spent days agonizing, poring over reports on Carsania, losing sleep as she wrestled with the ghost of her ex-husband's pragmatism. Was she strong enough to turn her back on billions for the sake of a principle? On the third day, seeking clarity, she did something she hadn't done in years. She reached out to Leo Vance, the programmer whose genius Adrian had first stolen. After the scandal broke, Lilith had ensured he was compensated handsomely and anonymously, a silent acknowledgement of the debt he was owed. They had never spoken. He agreed to meet her for coffee at a small, unassuming cafe, far from the glitz of Silicon Valley. He was just as she remembered from old college photos, quiet, thoughtful, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see the world in lines of code. "I never thanked you," he said, stirring his latte. "The settlement. It changed my life. It allowed me to fund a small lab at the college. We're doing good work." "It wasn't a gift, Leo," she said. "It was a debt being paid." She found herself telling him about the Carsania deal, laying out the moral and financial dilemma. She wasn't seeking advice, merely a sounding board, someone who existed outside the corporate bubble. Someone who understood the true cost of Adrian's brand of ambition. He listened patiently, and when she was done, he said something that cut through all the noise. "When Adrian stole Nexus from me, it wasn't just about the money. He stole a piece of my soul, the joy of creating something. He took something beautiful and twisted it for his own gain." The question you have to ask yourself is, what is the soul of Innovate Corp now? What is the soul of the thing you're creating? Because once you sell that, you can never buy it back, no matter how many billions they offer you. It was the clarity she needed. The next day, she called an emergency board meeting. She walked in, stood at the head of the table, and gave her decision. "We are rejecting the offer from Carsania," she announced, her voice ringing with an authority that left no room for debate. "We will also be drafting and publishing a new corporate ethics charter, stating explicitly that Innovate Corp will not partner with organizations that violate fundamental human rights. Our technology must be a force for connection, not control. For empowerment, not oppression." She looked at the stunned faces. "Some of you will say this is bad business. I say it is the only business worth being in. Our value is not just in our algorithms and our patents, but in our principles. That is our brand. That is our soul. And it is not for sale. A slow smile spread across Rachel Evans's face. Marcus Thorne on screen gave a single, decisive nod. A new consensus rippled through the room. It was a defining moment, not just for the company, but for her. Leaving the office that evening, Lilith felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. The crown was still heavy, but for the first time, it felt like it truly belonged to her. She had not just won Adrian's kingdom. She had built her own on a foundation of integrity he could never have conceived of. The ghosts of the past were finally beginning to fade, replaced by the bright, limitless promise of a future she was writing for herself, one principled decision at a time. There you have it, a story of love, betrayal, and the ultimate reclamation of power. Lilith's journey shows us that sometimes the end you never wanted is the beginning you truly needed. It's a reminder that strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise. If you were captivated by Lilith's epic comeback and Adrian's stunning downfall, don't let the story end here. Hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with anyone who loves a tale of justice served cold, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. We have countless other stories of intrigue, drama, and sweet revenge coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one. Click subscribe now and become part of our storytelling community. We'll see you in the next video.